to The Fearless Pursuit. I'm Danielle Gilbo. Today we're joined by Everett Stephens, the founder of 767 Agency, an artist management and talent development firm in Memphis, Tennessee. 767 offers a comprehensive range of artist management services, including artist incubation, studio and video production, and business development. Clients currently include his son Sebastian and Isabella, whom we just interviewed last week. Everett is a military veteran and former banker who stumbled into the music business rather accidentally, eventually launching his own label and helping bands to succeed. Perhaps even more interestingly, Everett detoured in agricultural innovation, innovative community-oriented real estate investment, and has even helped negotiate international diplomatic agreements. Stay tuned for a wide-ranging conversation with veteran, founder, artist, and producer Everett Stephens. So hi, Everett.
Hey,
Thank you for
Danielle.
being here. I know you're a very, very busy person. So you're not just the dad of Sebastian, who
Right.
we just interviewed, but you also started your own talent incubator,
Yeah.
767. How did that even start?
Well, working with Sebastian throughout the years, you eventually find that, or for that matter, any type of young talent, we realize that we've been very fortunate with my family to be able to provide access to the support that Sebastian needs to fully realize his goals. During the course of that, we also found that there's an incredible amount of young talent out there, but who oftentimes do not have access to the tools and support systems they need to succeed. And so that gave birth to the 767 Agency, which allows us to wisely invest into talent that has the passion, drive, and desire to pursue, right now, music. And that's how it came to be.
What's the process like for choosing people to be a part of your 767?
That's a good question. I think two biggest things I look for are underlying talent. So do they have something there that can be cultivated? And then two, do they have the absolute drive to pursue it? And drive doesn't mean do they get excited about it, are they energetic about it. Drive to cultivate true talent means at a young age they recognize that there is a certain amount of sacrifice that comes along with the pursuit of talent. I'm sure you're familiar with sacrifice. There are things that you've done that you've had to miss out on in your previous pursuits, right, Danielle? Yeah.
But I think it's always worth it if it's something you love. I was, always wanting to do something within the arts, whether that be music or acting. And I think that when you find something you're really passionate about, it just doesn't feel like work.
It doesn't. And that's what I think that's common with very young talent, too, is that they recognize that there is, here's who I am, here's who I want to be. And it's very aspirational.
Yeah.
And then they recognize the path to get there is going to be profoundly different than most of their peers.
Yeah, it's nothing at all. I dropped public school to start homeschooling because it was going to be, you have too many days where you're out of school and we have to put you in court. It's like, whoa, I already think I know what I want to do. And I think that's, what happened with Saban.
That is, and Isabella, too.
Yeah.
Isabella was a product of homeschooling. And look, there are plenty of great public schools that support the arts. Unfortunately, they are fewer and fewer these days, right? That are willing to work with a kid who may need travel days, who may need to go work out of town for an extended period of time, right? And so you find yourself in the same situation we did, and that was to pursue homeschooling.
How did you even deal with that? Did you all have an online program that you had?
That's a good question. We were very involved with a wonderful local school, very involved with it. And it was a private school, but they started introducing a curriculum that was, it went against, it lost its sense of true independence. It was more focused on a public social response. And at the same time, Saba had been accepted to a course for Berkeley Online. He was 8 years old at the time. Now, I say those two distinct stories, Saba being accepted to Berkeley, and being a little bit frustrated with his current school at the time. And Mariella and I, my wife, Mariella and I were both contemplating maybe we should just homeschool the kid, right? Because the school was not working out the way we thought it was going to work out. And I'm like, it's going to be tough breaking the news to the kid. How are we going to do this, right? Because we're going to uproot them. All the nightmare scenarios a parent goes through when they think about uprooting and displacing their child. Literally, the day before we were going to have the discussion about homeschooling with him, he comes to us and says, Mom, Dad, he had just started third grade. Let's take a step back, and says, asked us, Mom, Dad, would it be okay if I homeschooled full time so I can pursue music? And we're like, yes, it would be okay. Funny thing you would ask, we're all on board. And so, that's how it came to be. Yeah.
And before, Saba was born, like, how did you even realize you wanted to be in the music industry at all?
Who, me?
Yeah.
That's a wild story. I never really thought about being in the music industry. I'd originally gotten moved to Memphis through the bank I was working for. Its headquarters was in Memphis, or is in Memphis, and they asked me to come there to take on a new assignment. And I did. During this time, I was single, completely obsessed with work, and didn't have any friends. So I would go out and just do myself in the local music scene, right? And start developing my own network of friends. But I became highly involved in the music scene. And one day, a band approached me and says, hey, do you mind managing us? I said, I don't know anything about managing a band. And they said, no, but you know a lot about managing business. And that's what we need. And I said, well, we could probably sort something out there. Yeah. And so my next step, though, because I was kind of a junior executive ranks, was to deconflict this notion of managing a band and working at a bank. So I went to my boss, who was also one of the most important mentors in my life. And he happened to be Justin Timberlake's manager and stepdad.
Wow.
And so that, you talk about a prophetic set of circumstances, right? Yeah. I said, Paul, I've been asked to be a manager of a band. And before I could, kind of present the case or even ask him permission, he said, just do it. I said, yeah, but I work for you. He goes, that's fine. He goes, man, go have some fun. Go do it. I said, but I don't know anything about managing a band. And he kind of put his hands up in there like, remember who I manage, right? And of course, it was his son. He was at the time working at the bank, and he was also Timberlake's business manager.
Wow.
And so I was very blessed that he threw every imaginable resource at me to support me and give me a crash course in the music business. And I did that. We sponsored a couple of records. We had a couple of records produced there in Memphis. But as time went on, that part of music management was, you're managing a lot of adult issues that I wasn't quite prepared for in the music industry, and had to take a step back from it. Made some great music, but took a step back. But I remained fascinated by it. My career took on an entrepreneurial spin shortly thereafter, and I ended up getting married to Mariella, my awesome wife. And then we start, planning on having a kid. But you don't plan to give birth to a musician, right?
Yeah.
And you look back on it all, once Saba's career started taking off, there had been a several-year gap in between me and my time being actively in the music industry. But I look back at the mentorship and the leadership I had, which was, you can't ask for any better than Timberlake's team, right?
Yeah.
And it was an absolute godsend. I'm like, there was a reason why I was so prepared to help Sebastian out. And that was because the experiences I had under Paul Harless is his name, his wife Lynn, and Justin's team. and they were all just wonderful people. And
That's
in case you're curious,
wow.
Justin is everything you'd hope he'd be in person.
Wow.
He's just a wonderful, wonderful human. He and his wife both are. So
That's really lucky. I feel like
yeah,
a lot of people are not what they seem at all.
no, that's right. That's right. But he's private, but he's generous, kind, giving, and just a wonderful person.
Do you find a lot of wonderful people, or is it pretty rare in the music industry
You
specifically?
know, that's I think the biggest thing in the music industry, and for that matter, I think any industry at all, is recognizing the fact that self interest is usually at the forefront of most decisions.
Mm.
And when you're kind of an altruistic person at heart, someone who's giving by nature, you can set yourself up for a lot of hurt and disappointment
Mm.
when you realize the person on the other end of the table is truly in it for self interest. But I get that. I mean, there's times you got to be out for number one. But this generation of the music industry I think, is actually improved because there's more. You have to be more self-reliant, self-sufficient. You have to look at yourself as if you're your own label, and you
Yeah.
got to approach the industry as if you're your own label, because the labels as we knew it, as when I was growing up, they controlled the entire industry. Now we've taken independent musicians have taken the power
Mm-hmm.
away from those guys, and the streaming services have, which is great. And your generation is also, doing less of the experimental stupidity that my generation did. Right? The industry when I was growing up. There was a certain level of expectation of party, of indulgence that's just not there anymore because the industry's been restructured.
Mm.
And I think you guys have got a better head on your shoulders in general. But yeah, so I think that in the long run, having that position of being self-reliant will ultimately result in a better musician down
Yeah.
the road. So.
What types of entrepreneurial adventures were you talking about?
Well, it was interesting because I had never wanted to be a banker. It's the last thing I ever wanted to do. I was very fortunate. I've been very fortunate a few occasions in life where someone saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, right? And I think that's what a good mentor will do for you. They will recognize potential, whereas you might not necessarily see that, right? And that led me to banking. Banking, I'll never forget one day I was walking in my, expensive custom suit. There's the 27 floors of the bank. In the bank, the people I worked with were amazing. It's a good institution, so it was
That's
nothing
great.
against them. But it was just this kind of feeling I had like, do I want to define my life? And I'm looking up here like I'm still in this same thought, looking up at the 27th floor. Do I want my life to be defined by creating, shareholder value for a bank? And and then I fell out of love, like at that moment, right? And and so I had always been curious of all things about improving energy.
Hmm.
I'd gotten my lungs scarred up fighting and burning oil wells with the Marine Corps. And I still do. I got sarcoidosis, scarred lung tissue from
Mm.
fighting in oil wells. And I was like, man, there has to be a better way to do this. So I want to find an efficient energy source through bioenergy at the nexus of food production and energy that made sense, because the bioenergy models, as we knew it, especially going back to this time period in, I don't know, 2007, they didn't make any sense. And I wasn't a scientist. Again, I was lucky to have people around me who believed in me. I built a model, recruited some top-notch scientists, and started working with the leadership of Mexico to develop some bioenergy initiatives down in Mexico. That's a very short version of
Wow.
it, okay? And found myself being, meeting an incredible group of people from around the world and scientists who all synced up on this vision, and we did some pretty good things. That actually evolved into providing some agricultural consulting to farmers to create long-term ladders out of poverty by providing access to credit facilities, technology transfers, and better farming practices, specifically in emerging markets in Latin America. Then Saba was born. And I was spending most of my time collecting passport stamps for a living, which I love to travel, but I also wanted to be present as a father.
Yeah.
So I developed an exit strategy for that.
Wow.
And, developed a rental model for residences, single-family residences, and eventually got into real estate investment. Raised some capital, got bank backing, and developed a residential investment model in Memphis that is very rewarding. Again, no experience in real estate whatsoever. Matter of fact, it was kind of like banking. I was like, I don't want to ever rent houses. It seemed like too much of a hassle. But you throw yourself at a business model, even though you have no experience in there. If it makes sense to you, and it might not make sense to 99% of the people out there, but your gut's telling you it's the right path. I de-risked it. In other words, you remove the risk elements to make sense of it financially, and then you take your first plunge. You purchase your first property, and we did that, and it worked well, and we replicated it, and we've got around, very fortunate. I got around 40 properties in Memphis right now, and growing, yeah, and the restaurant and stuff coming here soon. So I think, and I will always be an entrepreneur at heart. I don't think there's anything more rewarding than being able to say, I helped bring this to life, and I'm helping improve the lives of others in the process.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah. Very successful.
Well, been very fortunate. But let me be clear, Danielle. I've failed 1,000 times too. And I've there's been as much failure as there has been success. And I think during the process, you learn, what's truly important here. One, it's being a good father, a good husband, and having those core family values, and creating good mind, body, and spirit during the process, right? My body comes and goes. Sometimes I'll be training for months, and then other times I'm like, man, I got to be testing out those new recipes, right? So, but the spirit and the mind, and foundationally for us, that's church, that's family, right? And it's being generous in all that you do too. Yeah. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to be put down, cut down. You have to be willing to accept the challenges, the failures, and you got to be willing to evolve your own model, your business model, whatever that means, during the entrepreneurial pathway to succeed, and just have the absolute passion to know that you can succeed.
Very true.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Was it helpful for you to also manage Saba, where you didn't have to deal with all the record labels at first?
Yeah, I think that was part of the fun. It's just watching him become his own person, right? And never having, the only expectation I had of him, I had one, and that was not to be a good musician or an actor. It was to be a good person first. That's the only expectation I had. And that was the one pursuit as a father I had for him. But But yeah, I think in the long run, you know, being able to command his own future, let him have his own voice, uh, will result in a much better self-fulfilled artist, right?
Yeah.
I can't, you know, I'm a heavy metal guy growing up. I'm a punk rocker growing up, right? I'm a military dude. And Seba's really none of that, right? There comes a point where you got to let your kid be their own person.
Yeah.
And my biggest goal is to provide him, if God calls me home tomorrow, I would like to think that I've done a good enough job that Sebastian can take the helm and he's knowing where he's going with his future in the music industry, and that he has the foundation to succeed, right? So,
Wonderful father right there.
well,
So
we
then
try.
you say, your son has to be a good person. Do you also think that he needs to be involved in business, kind of like you were? Is that helpful, do you think, to be a musician?
100%. I have involved, say, anytime I have a young person around me in the music world, and right now that primary focus is Isabella and Sebastian. I involve them in all the business discussions. I involve them
Great.
in all the spreadsheets. I involve them in the contracts, the contracting language. Now I'm going to steer them,
Yeah.
and I'm going to show them why decisions are made, but I'm
Yeah.
going to show them, provide them, equip them with the information on why I make decisions the way I do. And that comes understanding the contracts. That comes from understanding the financial side, the budgets, the cash flow, right? That comes from understanding the marketing. A musician is inherently an entrepreneur.
Yes.
There is no question that uh, the same skill set one requires to be a business entrepreneur is they translate equally well to being a music entrepreneur. And I think that's one of the shortcomings for most musicians is that they don't adopt this mind frame of I am an entrepreneur.
Mm.
And you have to, because you got to think about it. I got a product I want to sell. That product is me or in my music, right? But what does it take to sell that product? Well, it takes marketing. It takes a budget.
Mm-hmm.
It takes some business operations on the legal side, on the administrative side. Everything it takes to be a successful entrepreneur are the same skill sets required to be a musician.
And do you think social media marketing is a really good way
I
to do
think,
that?
yeah, there's no question that um, for Gen Z, Gen A, uh, more bands, more music will be discovered through TikTok and Instagram
Mm-hmm.
and whatever we don't even know is coming. But right now, in this present time, we know that somewhere in the neighborhood of 60-70% of up and coming music and artists are going to be found through TikTok alone.
Wow.
We saw it with Seba and Bella's. They met with a band called Soundbox, and it was a rock band. I think you saw them last year, right?
Yeah.
And they blew up on TikTok, and we saw the power of that. It was stunning. But yeah, social media is where it's at. Again, that's part of the marketing platform. Yeah, back in my generation, when the labels were around, the labels handled the marketing for you. They did the posters, they did the street teams, they did all the ground level, grassroots level marketing. Uh, Social media is an incredibly efficient platform to get that music out as a budding entrepreneur.
Yeah. What are some of the lessons you've learned while either, trying to help Seba do his thing or as, trying to manage a band for the first time?
Yeah, and a lot of these again translate to being successful in business, regardless. One of the most important things is that I'm going to be investing my time into these young musicians. And again, right now it's primarily Isabel and Sebastian. I think it's absolutely critical to establish, if we're going to work together, establish a certain set of expectations,
Yeah.
right? I think, and understanding what their dreams and desires are, and ensuring that they have a set of dreams, desires, their own vision that can be understood through and supported through a set of expectations that I may have for them. And those expectations are very, very easy. It's do your best at all times. Provide maximum effort with all you do. You cannot be lukewarm about your dreams, right? Because somebody else out there are going to be willing to outwork you and outperform you, right? And so you have to be fully committed to that. I think one of the key things from my personal perspective is I've always felt that one of my most comfortable pathways to success is really cultivating a team. And if you learn how to focus on the success of others and have faith that your success will ultimately be a byproduct of that, then you can unlock incredible potential. What you have to be able to do is ensure that the person that you're focused, you're helping to become successful, that they are absolutely worth your time. And when I say worth your time, I'm just really talking about, are they morally grounded? Do they have a clear sense of ethics?
Yeah.
You know, are you more or less equally yoked in this relationship as a manager and a budding musician, right? So.
Do you have a funny story of one of the biggest challenges you had to overcome?
In the music world?
Yeah, I guess as being a manager for the first time.
I think, well, the very first time out years ago, I think the biggest challenge was understanding ego and habits and things that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, right? I think with this current evolution, it's, again, ensuring that, especially as a young person, the person you are at 12 or 14 is going to be can be completely different in 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah.
When you're an adult, you get, sort of set in your ways, I guess. You got a clearer vision, hopefully, of who you are. You're comfortable in your own skin, and you're going the direction that you set out for yourself. Those things can change vastly from the time of adolescence to teenage years, right? Mm-hmm. And that whole notion of being a musician that's going to follow this path may change. I think that's one of the things I've seen with musicians is that you start out with a vision, and like any entrepreneur, though, you got to be perfectly comfortable with the fact that things will change. You got to be a little bit nimble and adjust to it, and that's fine. But completely veering off course and saying, no, I'm no longer interested in this path, I think that's one of the hardest challenges is if you're going to surround yourself with youthful, incredible talent, that you got to be comfortable in the fact that they're still young and their vision for themselves could change on a moment's notice. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, Everett, what advice would you have for young budding musicians who want to create like a unique sound?
Interesting. I view it kind of this way. We're not born in a metal stamping factory. That doorknob knows one thing. I'm going to be a doorknob. That's what I was stamped out to do. Humans, the only thing we're stamped out to do is to be the best versions of ourselves. And you have to give yourself permission to reinvent yourselves as many times as it takes to figure out what path is best for you. And be confident in that. Be willing to accept failure. Be willing to accept criticism. And be willing to accept criticism in places from sources that I think are sometimes surprising. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's going to be critics that come along who are well-intentioned. They're providing you good advice because they care about you. But on the pathway to success and finding your own sound, finding your own groove, wherever that may mean, I think you have to acknowledge that sometimes the toughest critics will be people that are willing to look at you and smile and call themselves your friend along the way, and yet they are some of the worst vocal critics of you because I think they're ultimately jealous. Does that make sense
Yeah.
to you? So I think in finding your own sound, you have to be willing to experiment. You have to be willing to play 1 million bad notes and be patient in the process, right?
Yeah.
And seek inspiration. Expose yourself to the classics, the standards. Expose yourself to the new stuff, to the avant-garde, to the art house. You never know where inspiration is going to happen, but it's going to happen. So if I could sum it up, I would say be courageous, be patient, and be willing to reinvent yourselves, because the human condition, that's one of the most amazing, the human condition, especially in the United States, that's one of the most amazing things, is that you can be whoever you want to be. You were not born in a metal stamping factory with one singular purpose, right?
Yeah.
Remove the barriers.
Mm-hmm. So when my dad was growing up, he was a musician, loved music, and he always told me that to make money you had to sell a bunch of plastic things like CDs and records, anything tangible, and
celluloid
stadiums.
tapes, cassettes.
Yeah. And stadiums and T-shirts were supplemental. How would you say that musicians make money nowadays?
Yeah, so that's been one of the most. There are clearly some transformative times when it comes to the evolution of musician income, right? Again, just like your dad and my time, it was the classic label model. You get a label deal and you sell albums and you get royalties from the albums, and then you get radio plays, right? Then you go sell out concert stadiums and you get merch, and so but the biggest thing was, the biggest generator of income for musicians were selling physical products. Right now, over the past, probably about 2005, we started seeing a major push that completely eliminated record stores as we see, as we know them, because of the streaming platforms. You will see that the majority of income opportunity from physical products has disappeared. So musicians have had to become more creative with getting their streaming services out there. The tough part about streaming is it's tough to make a living on just streaming alone, right? Unless you've got millions of monthly followers and millions of streams. Spotify, for example, I think is 0.0033 cents per stream. It's small. And so it is incumbent upon the musician to find ways to monetize their product. Streaming is going to be there, but you need to view it as like it should be at the forefront of thought, but on the back burner of opportunity. Okay,
Yeah.
If that makes any sense for income. Musicians are having to get out there and gig more so than they used to, because that's where income is being derived from. They're also needing to find ways to creatively sell merch. The good side of this is that social media platforms creates this enormous outreach, if you can. I'll give you an example, a real world example with these two. Their rock band Soundbox, when they crossed over 100,000 followers on TikTok, an average post between 30 seconds, to 45 seconds, depending upon how it hit, was making $50 to $1,500 per post.
Whoa.
For a 30-second post, okay? Something like that wasn't available when we were younger, right? But again, you have to think extraordinarily creatively to access that entire digital market. And when I say digital market, that's encompassing the streaming platforms and the social platforms, right? And they work hand in glove together, because the more social interaction you get and engagement you get will typically have some quantifiable translation over into the streaming services, right? So the more social engagement you get, the more streaming you're going to get. The more streaming you're going to get, the more you can justify getting out there on the road and touring. And
Yeah.
so you have to leverage every resource you have in the digital age. It's also the same with selling merch. If you develop that base, one thing that was amazing with us is that we would make as much money we would make more money selling merch than we would actually in the gig guarantee.
Wow.
Yeah. But I guess my point there is design cool merch, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Design super cool merch that your fans are going to appreciate. You have to become the brand with music these days, and lead with that brand in mind. Again, I know I've kind of beat up this notion of being an entrepreneur and a business mind, but don't just think of yourself as this is me and my music. You are the living embodiment of your own brand.
Yeah.
And how do you want to market and position that brand? And it's going to be digital, and digital is going to be streaming. It's going to be social, and it's also going to be live performances. But again, if you make social media a priority, the very first live stream they ever did, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 people on that stream.
Wow.
Now, mind you, it was a 45-minute stream. We took questions. I say we. They took questions and played a song after about 5 minutes of questions. So it was like 5 minutes of questions, a few minutes of a song. They went back and forth for 45 minutes. But the thing that absolutely shocked me about that experience is that 20,000 people viewing, that's the equivalent of a large stadium selling out, right?
Yeah.
We wouldn't have 20,000 people come watch us, right?
Yeah.
At a stadium at the time, but we had enough TikTok followers around the world. They could be viewed in a concert setting, and clear $1,000 and never leave their basement.
Wow.
So again, to summarize it, be the brand, identify your revenue sources as a priority, and those should be performance, streaming, social media, and merch, right? Because you're not going to be selling a lot of physical copies of your albums.
Yeah.
So
That's crazy how it's changed.
it's crazy, yeah. And AI is going to present a whole other set of opportunities and challenges as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we've observed with AI is, I don't know if Isabel and Sebastian mentioned this remix contest they did.
Yes, yeah.
It's crazy. Over 2,000 entrants from 58 countries, and we're filtering through a bunch of submissions, people who actually followed through with submissions. But I'll never forget hearing one of the early submissions. I'm like, golly, they got that one through quick. Like the contest opened up, and then they submitted something, right?
Wow.
I'm like, how do you do that? And I start playing the song. I'm like, this is absolutely amazing. And Sebastian says, no, it's not. I said, why? I said, it sounds amazing. I can't believe they're even singing over it. And he says, Dad, that's AI.
Oh, no.
And I clearly stated in the terms and conditions that AI submissions would not be considered, right? Some AI production is allowed because AI is integrated in music production no matter what, right? But we had people out there. We had a couple of them who completely inserted the song lyrics into an AI algorithm and output an entire song. Blew me away. So I think that the future of monetization, we're going to see some arguments coming about, should you be allowed to monetize AI? Well, we're currently seeing that, and there's pros and cons. But I think it takes a good ear to understand the difference between a completely digitally created song and the organic warmth that comes from one that's built in more traditional formats with real instruments, right? So, past, present, and future. And you're going to be on the cusp of this AI,
Yeah.
Danielle, as you edge forward. So good luck with it.
Thank you very much. Well, this was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. What is next for you, Everett?
For me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I spend 75% of my time in the music supporting Isabel and Sebastian. I spend the other 75% of my time in entrepreneurial endeavors. So I really have a passion for cooking, for real estate, and music. And we're in the process of actually designing and developing a couple of cool restaurant music venue places up in Memphis. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Do you have names?
Yeah, we do. It's one big property, and on the front of it is going to be kind of this, gourmet pastry, small plate bistro, and that's called Dobro's. So it's a bakery called Dobro's, and my partner and I are both from Southern Louisiana. We spell dough like you would Go Tigers, Deaux, bros, Breaux, so Dobro's. And then on the backside of it is a full-scale restaurant and a large outdoor music venue, and that's called Ramble on Summer.
Are you ever going to play there?
They are, yeah. I'm gonna sling dough,
There you go.
and make pizza.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then for these guys, Isabel and Sebastian, they have a big album coming out in June that we're really excited for. I think you heard some of the songs here recently.
They're wonderful.
Thank you. And so for the next few months, it's all about gearing up for the press and the promo and the release of the album. So yeah, that's what I got going on.
Incredible. Well, I'm so happy for you. I cannot wait to visit.
Yeah, we can't wait to have
music.
you. Yeah, Memphis. You got a house in Memphis anytime you want to visit. So
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.